So, a little tidbit. Let me give you an introduction here of myself. As I think Ann said a little bit, or maybe is on the announcement. I'm a Florida trial lawyer. I've been practicing for 10 years now, going into my 11th year. I'm currently getting ready to sit for the Pennsylvania bar whenever COVID allows that to happen, so that I can expand and take cases in Pennsylvania and then potentially New York and New Jersey as well. But I've been practicing for 10 years. I've been in a number of different areas. I started out as a prosecutor for the Pasco Hernando prosecutor's office, state attorney's office. I went from there to practicing at a small personal injury firm, specifically because I was a litigator, because I could come in and help pick juries, help present evidence, cross-examine witnesses. From there, I was then brought in actually during the foreclosure crises that were going on, 2013, 2014. I was hired by a couple different condo firms to come in and help them litigate their issues. And then from there, I got picked up by a large insurance firm out of Tampa, where I've been until about a year ago. And then the last year, I've actually opened my own practice. I'm specializing in personal injury and real estate, homeowners cases. But really, I would say more than 50% of my clients right now are other lawyers, people who are getting ready to go to trial. I've got one case I'm working on right now with a divorce lawyer out of West Palm Beach. He's never gone to trial. He's been a lawyer for 8 years, never gone before. So hopefully in the next 6 months or so, I'll be going with him to help him pick a jury, potentially even to do the opening statements with him, depending on his comfort level. So I would say my specialty is not necessarily in any one area of the law, but in how to apply it, how to be a problem solver, and how to get the client the best result, and usually as quickly as possible, right? Because a lot of people think lawyer, okay, as soon as he gets a case, he's going to file a lawsuit. But I would say 70, 80% of the cases that we get in, or that I get in and resolve, are resolved without a lawsuit ever being filed. In fact, by the time you file a lawsuit, a lot of times you lose your leverage, because once it's filed, now the other side has to pay for a lawyer, has to pay for their opening work that they have to do, answering your complaints, sending you discovery. So there's a lot of things that go into being a litigator outside of just being that trial lawyer you see on Law and Order. And so that's where I've really specialized now, and kind of trying to get to my nuances, just being able to help people decide, number one, how can I set the case up from the very beginning to resolve it as quickly as possible? Or if we're stuck and we are going to court, how do I best present this case? And that's really where I've been specialized in the past few years, and the areas that I could talk most about. But like I said, I've worked in small law firms. I've worked in medium-sized law firms. I worked in a large law firm. I've started doing my own solo practice. I've also worked in the government. I think you'll see, the more you look at the legal field, whether it's being a lawyer, whether it's being a paralegal, or whether it's even being a legal assistant or an investigator, there are 1,001 areas of the law that you can go into, and 1,000 different ways that you can help people. And I would say that's especially true now more than it ever has been. The transition was starting to happen when I was in law school. They were starting to talk about how it used to be every single person who graduated from, their law school would go into a big firm right away. And then maybe after a few years would do their own practice, or would get picked up by a small law firm. But that's not true anymore. Law firms, like a lot of businesses, are starting to understand that they don't need as many people as they have. And a lot of businesses are learning they don't need to have to pay these $500 an hour attorneys to do work, when there are hundreds and hundreds of other lawyers who have their own practice or have small practices and are willing to help. So I think you're going to see in your own time, both now and even 5, 10 years from now, I think even more, you're going to start to see this transition away from that typical suit and tie lawyer that you picture, Tom Cruise or somebody else going into a big law firm and just being one of 1,000 other lawyers. That is really kind of fading out. It's still going to exist. There's still always going to be those big firms in New York and Chicago and LA, but they're not hiring the numbers they used to hire. And you're starting to see a very large conglomeration of people who just have their own practice and specialize in one area or another. I've got one friend, for example, who used to do immigration law. I'm not going to mention the firm, but for a big firm in Tampa. He did that for almost 8 years. Now he just does B1 and B2 visas. That's it. He doesn't do work visas. He doesn't do NACARA or any other types of immigration law. He doesn't do anything other than just obtaining those 2 licenses. And so he gets hired by, by contract by this firm to help him with this case for this one time, and then by this specific client. So I think you're seeing a big transition into that. And that's certainly what I'm participating in now, and really seeing a benefit. And I apologize if the cat jumps over here.
Hey Ryan, a lot of the students are asking questions about how do you become a prosecuting attorney?
Mm-hmm.
But if you could start from what you would recommend as far as a major in for their bachelor's, and then how that process works in going to law school or applying, that's some of the questions that they've been asking.
Sure. And I see there's a couple of questions about the types of degrees. The first thing I would tell you is look at the law schools that you're interested in. Most law schools that I'm aware of require you to have a Bachelor of Arts or a Bachelor of Science in something. And even if they don't, I still think that you want to have something as your undergrad to meet their minimum requirements. That said, I think you'll hear from a lot of law schools that they really don't care about the specific area that you got your major in. I know for myself, I was a political science and Spanish major, and I thought political science, that's perfect for going to law school. But a lot of law schools will tell you English is better than political science. Well, I know when I went to Stetson as an undergrad, they used to brag that the valedictorian for Stetson, this was a few years ago now, but the valedictorian at a Stetson Law School in 2007 was a trumpet major for undergrad. So as far as the specific area of your degree, I don't think that is nearly as important as the types of legal experience you can get ahead of time. But that said, you do need to check on your law school, because a lot of law schools do have a minimum requirement. They're going to have a minimum degree that you have to have. They may even have a certification process. The school that you got your degree from may have to have a certain type of certification. That depends on the law school itself. So that's one thing to check on. And the other thing too, kind of in that same area, is you need to look now, I would say even more than your specific area that you're studying, you need to look at the LSATs and you need to look at your GPA, because like a lot of colleges, law schools are very similar in that they all oftentimes have a minimum. No matter what else, if your LSAT score is not at a certain amount or your GPA is below a certain amount, the computers just kick you right out. You're not into what they need. Now that's changing. I do see that changing a lot, but it's not a non-existent factor anymore. So I would say more important than your specific degree, as long as it's something that the law school is willing to accept, I think more important for you is those other 2 things. Focus on your LSAT scores and your GPAs. And let me talk about the LSAT just for 1 second, because I think this is something that I've seen people miss out on a lot. You can take your LSAT, your legal SAT, as late as June, as late as your summer of your junior year. But like the SATs, you can take the LSAT more than once. And there are some schools that want every one of your LSAT scores, but a lot of them just ask for your best LSAT score. So I would say, again, even more important than your specific area of your degree, getting that LSAT score as high as you can, taking classes in how to actually take it. Because the LSAT, just like the SAT, is somewhat based on your knowledge, but you really can't study for that as much as you can study for how the test actually occurs. What is it that they're going to do? If they're going to give you, for example, an LSAT, a huge paragraph to read and 1 question, well, that counts just as much as all these small individual questions. That's just an example, but there's a lot of ways to study for and practice the LSAT that will be, again, 10 times more important to what schools you're able to get into than your specific degree. That said, the areas that are most going to help you, I think, English is a big one, right? I think you would have a hard time being a lawyer if you can't write effectively and in a more simple, straightforward manner. If you write like I talk and you kind of ramble on sometimes, you need to practice that now. You need to take some English classes to work on that now, because you'll get hit when you're in law school. If you haven't taken any public courses, if you're afraid of talking to people, now's the time to take some classes on public speaking or communication. Even just sitting down, I did it a lot when I was an undergrad. I sat down with my counselor a lot. My counselor used to laugh and say, you already know what you want. You already know you want to go to law school. You already know what law schools you want. How can I help you? And I'd say, just sit down and talk to me for half an hour. Let me bounce ideas off of you and tell me if I'm rambling. Tell me if I'm using my hands too much. Tell me if I'm not making my point effectively. Things like that can go a long way in how effective you are both getting into law school and succeeding in law school itself. Learning to be a better communicator, both written and orally, and also critical reading. I think that's important too, whether it's in, but I think that it goes everywhere. I don't know if that's necessarily a specific degree. I think a history major is going to learn critical reading just as much as somebody who's an English major, but those three things, how to write effectively, how to speak effectively, and how to be able to read things effectively. Keeping constantly in mind quae bono and those kind of phrases, thinking that keeping that critical reasoning thinking, those are the kind of things that are more important now than necessarily that specific area. That said, I will also give you one more thing. Again, I think you're better suited right now to thinking about not necessarily what my degree is or what area I'm trying to practice now, but what law school is it that I want to go to. If you want to go to an Ivy League school, each of them is different. You know, UPenn focuses on very different things than Harvard and Yale does. If you want to go to UF Law School, UF's very focused on certain things. UF loves mock trial programs. They love people who go into the Lamar Inn of Courts or the Toastmasters. They love people who have those on their resumes, and they'll tell you flat out, we want litigators. We want people who can speak. I've seen other schools, when I applied at Emory, they had me sit down for an interview and they wanted to know about my writing. How much had I studied for writing? So, and that was something I made a mistake on. I should have been asking Emory long before I applied to them. I should have been asking them, what is it that you're highlighting? What is it that you want to see from your students? Because then I could have focused maybe on taking more English classes or having that as a minor or having something that focused on giving the school that I wanted to go to all the reasons to hire me or to bring me on, you know, into their program. So that's the stuff that you want to focus on now. And it also, I think, is something that makes you a good lawyer. Your due diligence, your ability to research and find the answers to what you want is a critical skill. It's even easier now than when I was an undergrad to be able to go online and in 20 minutes find all the information you want about your specific state that you want to practice in or your law school you want to go to. So do some of that background research. Try to see what it is that they want and give them that.
Can you see the chat? So can you see some of this? Okay, great.
Okay, so let me go. Yes, okay, so let's talk about the LSAT for a second then. The LSAT is the legal SAT. The SAT that you took to get into college, it's a very similar format put on by the same people. It's very similar where you're going to sit down and have a very set period of time to answer a set number of questions. They'll all be multiple choice and you either knew it or you didn't get it, right? It's either right or wrong. And like the SAT, I think the SAT is still the same way. There isn't any wrong answer. So that's why I say for the LSAT, if you're interested in it, even just go to your library, whether it's at school or your local library, there'll be huge books that are just based on the LSAT that'll tell you how to take it, when to take it, and most importantly, the gamemanship that's involved in it, because everything that's involved in the SATs, just like the LSATs, have a gamemanship. Everybody who's read and researched and practiced the SATs or the LSATs before they actually take the real one is going to do far better than somebody who's maybe smarter than them, but didn't do any of that preparation. Now, if LSAT is something I don't want to give too much of it because I do want you guys to do some research. You do have to go and Google LSAT at least if you want to go to law school and you can't do that much, you're going to have trouble. So I do want you to do that a little bit, and they lay that out very clearly: when to take it, how to take it. I can tell you, my understanding is always that the last time you can take your LSAT is the summer of your junior year, because you're going to be applying for your law school in the fall of your senior year, right? Or the 2 semesters before, right? So if you want to really, no, I guess it is at the fall either way. No matter where you are and when you started undergrad, law schools are always going to be starting in the fall. I don't know any law schools that I can think of right now that are going to start you in the spring. They want everybody together and they want you to do the same 3-year process together. So no matter where you are in your degree, you're going to be applying in the fall of the year before you want to go to that law school. So you have to have your LSAT scores in before that summer. Go ahead.
While you were in at Stetson, did you participate in like a pre-law student org or any association that helped you understand the LSAT and the law school application process and
Sure.
that research?
I want to speak very positively of my undergrad. So all I'll say is that they did not have a very focused pre-law program. But what they did have was a number of professors who had either gone to law school, worked as lawyers, or otherwise had worked in the legal field. And I was able to go and speak to a number of them. One of my political science professors, I actually stayed with my political science degree specifically because she was a former lawyer. She'd done administrative law, worked in DC, worked with the White House before becoming a government teacher. And, and interacting with her was better than anything else that I did through the programs. There is, for example, in undergrad, there's Phi Alpha Delta. There's a pre-law fraternity. I was a part of that in undergrad, and we would meet and kind of do a Toastmasters type of thing where everybody would, be asked to speak for 5 minutes. But I don't think that helped me anywhere near as much as being able to talk to lawyers, talk to teachers that had gone to graduate school or law school or anything like that, to be able to get an idea from them, what do I need to be doing now? The types of things that you can learn from a pre-law program, I think you can also learn online. But the types of things that a professor who's gone through this, or any person, a lawyer, a judge, anybody who's gone through the law school process, I think is going to give you far better information. And so that's what I think I would be focusing on. If you have Phi Alpha Delta on your resume, you might have other people at the law school that say, oh yeah, I was in Phi Alpha Delta too, great. Maybe that'll help you with a little bit of a check mark, but that's about as much as I think I ever got out of that. Whereas talking to former lawyers, people who had gone to law school, and focusing on what it was that they wish they knew going into law school, I think was far more beneficial. And let me use that to answer the other question. Someone's asking about how do I choose the type of lawyer I want to be. I don't have any preference yet. I'll tell you, I actually think most lawyers in law schools kind of roll their eyes if you do tell them, I don't know what area I want to be in yet. Because that's a very common question. What type of law do you want to practice? And if you shrug your shoulders and say, I don't know, I just want to be a lawyer, it just, even if it's true, and it was true for me in undergrad throughout, I knew I wanted to be, I kind of leaned towards being a prosecutor. I knew I wanted to be a litigator, but I didn't know the specific areas. And thankfully I had a professor in law school that said, don't ever tell anybody ever again, you don't know what area of law you want to go into. Just name something at least. Or start thinking in your own mind the general areas you want to go into, because it shows people that you've done the research. It shows people that you've started to focus on it. If you tell people, I want to be a real estate lawyer, I want to be a prosecutor, and then you come out of law school and you're something else, nobody's going to shake their head and say, you can't do that. You told me I was you were going to be a prosecutor. Can
you give some examples of different type and like what personality or skill set might go well with that?
Sure. So I'm trying to think how I can do this. It's very generalized. In a very general way, I could say that there are, in my mind, two different types of lawyers. There's litigators, and there are, I'm trying to think of a better term, people who are better at legal writing or being able to work by themselves. And there's obviously areas that would benefit from each of those. I think you would have a hard time being a prosecutor or a defense attorney who's in trial a lot if you have difficulty public speaking. That said, if you listen to Joe Biden talk the other night, he had a speech impediment throughout most of his life, and he was able to overcome it by constantly, working on it. I think that type of thing can apply very much here as well. If you want to be a litigator, but you know that you're not great at it, the only way to really get better at it is to keep practicing, is to do that kind of immersion therapy, really get in there and, feel the fear and learn it. But that said, it's not a requirement. And I actually think sometimes it was more prestigious. When I've switched from practicing directly as a litigator to now having my own practice, I actually feel more prestigious now, because before, when I was working at a firm, they would just give me assignments. Ryan, this trial is coming up. You go and do that. Now people come to me for advice. Ryan, I'm thinking of buying this piece of property. I'm thinking of doing this. Tell me about that. What do you think about that? And that's not litigation. That's the opposite. That is trying to prepare somebody to not have to go to court. And there's a lot of areas of law like that. Certainly wills, trusts, and estates, for example. There are a lot of people who work in those areas that will never have to go to a courtroom. They'll never have to call up defense counsel and fight with them. They'll never even have to call up their own client and fight with them. So if that kind of thing scares you, but you still want to be a lawyer, I think those are certainly 3 good areas. I think there's a lot of bankruptcy attorneys as well, foreclosures attorneys. There's a lot of areas, but I don't want to exclude it either. I think of myself now mainly as a real estate attorney, but I do mostly real estate litigation. I don't write the real estate contracts. I am given the contract by my client and asked, how do I get out of this? Right? So I help them do that. Somebody had to sit down and write that contract, and that person is not going to be the opposing counsel in that case. So even in an area like real estate, and even in an area like criminal law, I don't think you have to be necessarily a litigator to be successful. I know, I'm telling you about the divorce attorney that I'm working with right now as a client friend of mine. I'm going to be helping him with trial because he's been a divorce lawyer for 8 years. 8 years in Florida. He's handled hundreds and hundreds of cases, never gone to court. Why? Because until about a year and a half ago, he had a partner, and his partner would go to court, and that was his job. He was the litigator, and the other guy was more the schmoozer. He was the one that met with clients. He was the one that helped smooth things over. So you had the good cop, bad cop situation going on in this 2-man law firm. So you had 2 very different personalities, but they were both divorce lawyers. So I think that there's definitely room for all types of personalities. I think there's certainly people that you'll bump into and just say, that person's a lawyer, right? They question everything you say. They don't have anything that they can't ever make a counter argument to. I think there's certain aspects, certain attributes of people that make good lawyers. Critical thinking has to be that number one. I keep coming back to Qui Bono, but that ability to constantly tell yourself there is no right answer. There's only the answer depending on the facts, and being able to constantly ask yourself, why are they saying this? Who's benefiting from it? That type of critical thinking, no matter whether you're a litigator or a writer or anything else, that's more something that would apply everywhere. But in terms of specific personalities, I think that there's all kinds. And also there's all kinds of people in it. I practiced in Broward County down in Fort Lauderdale for a long time. And I used to love taking video for people of the line. So in the Broward courthouse, they have one line for non-lawyers and one line for lawyers because I guess, more difficult to deal with. But if you watch that line, especially as court's getting started, it gets really backed up. And you'll see this whole line of attorneys. And you would think it's just a bunch of short crop top white guys like me with their ties and, suits and yet when you go there to Florida and I see everywhere else, you get a whole motley crew of everybody. I mean, you see guys with ponytails and crazy beards. You see all kinds of stuff. As long as they're good, as long as they can zealously represent their clients, there's all types. And you'll see, I mean, that's the one nice thing I've seen too, as I've progressed in the past 10 years, the judges, the demographics of the judges are changing. It used to be all former prosecutors, right? And then they became criminal judges. And then maybe if they didn't do great, they also became civil judges. You're seeing a loss of that. You're seeing people who are judges now that have never done anything but insurance defense, but they come in because they've got the right thinking that court wants, in there. So I would say that there isn't any one personality anymore of a lawyer. There isn't any one attribute. You can use whatever your strengths are to help define the area of law that you go into. And the last thing I'll say on that too is keep an open mind. I very much wanted to be a prosecutor. I saw somebody on here before that said that was your dream job. That was my dream job going into law school. I wanted to be a prosecutor. My dad was a parole officer. I wanted to do that. I spent about a year doing that and said, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to do criminal law and I don't want to do family law. It's too messy, deal with too many things that I could not myself. I couldn't just objectively, go to bed and say, oh, no problem. I was just zealously representing my client. I couldn't do it. And so I switched to an area where I was actually helping people who were injured or people who were hurt. And then I can actually take through and say, okay, I don't want to take these cases, but I can take these, especially now doing my own practice. It's even more rewarding for me now because I've had cases where I've listened to it and said, man, that client's going to make some money, but I don't like what you're trying to do, so I'm not going to take your case. Before, when I worked in a big law firm, I couldn't do that. Now that I have my own practice, I can. So keep an open mind to it too. There's a lot of ways that, you can use your personality and your specific attributes to sell things and to really become a good lawyer.
So I think we
Well,
had
we're running out of time.
I was going to say, two questions that are in there is about paralegal, and the one student is currently a law clerk.
Okay.
And she's asking, which I think all of them would benefit from, what are some things you can do during your bachelor's degree to better prepare you?
Sure.
If that's right, Chrissy.
Let me do the paralegal side first. If you guys are having anything to write down, I would tell you all to go to, it's paralegaledu.org. So don't get the edu confused. It's paralegaledu.org. It's one of the few nonprofit ways of people explaining paralegals, and they really go through for Florida, the different areas. But the overview for paralegals is that unlike lawyers, you don't have to have a certain education or even a certain testing requirement to become a paralegal. There are non-certified paralegals and there are certified paralegals. And I'm just talking specifically about Florida right now. Some states are a little different, but in Florida, you can be a paralegal if a lawyer hires you to be a paralegal. But even if without having any legal experience, even not having any type of registration, anything else, you can have that. But you'll see more and more, and certainly in the big law firms, they're not going to hire anybody that's not a certified paralegal. Now, if you want to be a lawyer, for example, you have to go to, it's very simple. You have to go to an ABA law school and graduate from it. That gets you your JD. You have to take a bar exam in the state that you're in, and you have to continue whatever the legal education requirements are every 2 or 3 years. But you have to have those. As a paralegal, you don't have those requirements. And you also don't have the overview structure. In Florida and really nationally, you have the American Bar Association. You can't be a lawyer unless you're certified by the American Bar Association. With paralegals, there's a number of ways to become a certified paralegal. And there's a number of organizations that provide testing to allow you to be a certified paralegal. You can be a paralegal by registering and taking a test with the state of Florida. You can become a paralegal by practicing for a certain period of time, depending on which of the certifications you want. If you just practice with a law firm for a while and have 1 or 2 lawyers write letters of recommendation, that experience is enough to qualify for certain paralegal degrees. So that's where I would tell you to go look. Paralegal.edu lays out those requirements a little better. I know there's at least 3 different types of certifications you can get. One is exclusively from testing, one is exclusively from experience. And I think the other one gives you a mix of both of those. Definitely take a look at those. Now they do have some things like lawyers. I think all paralegals, once they become certified, have to have, it's like 30 or 40 certified, or 30 or 40 hours of continuing education every year. There are some things once you become certified that require you to keep up with it. It's not just once you become a certified paralegal, you have it for the rest of your life. But how you get there is there's a little bit more of a myriad path to how to get through that. And thank you, Ann, for putting that up there. Continuing education means just that for both paralegals and lawyers, you have a certain number of hours of class time or education training that you have to go through, even though you're already certified. Like, even though I'm a lawyer right now in Florida, I have to have, I don't even know now, I think it's 200 continuing education hours every 3 years. And I have to self-report those to the bar. I can either go, like pre-COVID, they used to have the meetings all the time. Every time you go to the Broward County Bar Association meeting, or the American Bar Association meeting, or even something like this, a lot of times a lawyer would come on and I'd be able to offer a CLE credit for anybody who's listening. Now it's almost exclusively online, but it just means that you can't just become a lawyer and now you're a lawyer for the rest of your life. You have to pay your dues every year. You have to you have certain reporting requirements if you're keeping any trusts. And more important for both paralegals and lawyers, you have to continue your education, because being a lawyer, even when I graduated in 2010, the law is very different than it was, than it is now in 2020. And we know the Supreme Court justices issues going on right now. There could be a whole new areas of law that are made here in the next year or two, or areas of law that we thought were cemented, unfortunately, that they may try to remove. Listening to what Alito and some other people were talking about yesterday, the law changes, and so they're always going to require you to keep up with that. Last thing I would tell you, though, is that if you're interested in being a paralegal, even more than being a lawyer, if you want to be a paralegal, now's the time to go in and get internships, get free work. Lawyers will always take free work, even if it's just, like I said, filing in the back room, trying to keep clients organized, or just sitting. I mean, I used to love, when I would do depositions, to try to bring in law interns to come sit with me, so that even though they weren't interacting, they weren't actually getting to ask any questions. When we would pause for a minute, I'd go outside, I could go and ask them, did you guys catch anything? Did I miss something? Did I ask something wrong? Did they say something that I missed? What do you guys think about that? And I guarantee you, if you sit down and go to 5 depositions with a lawyer this summer, you're going to be 10 steps ahead of the majority of people that you're competing against to get into law school. And you'll have something to talk about on your resume, on your personal statement. And if you have to do an interview, now you have something to talk about. I was at 5 depositions. And if someone told me that, I'd ask them, okay, what was the depositions about? Tell me. And all of a sudden now we've got flow of information from those people. So that's something that I think is really important.